Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 16 of the Live Your Gem podcast. I'm your host, Ellen McGinnis. And today we're going to talk about something that I believe is one of the most radical acts a woman can take at this time. This is from my writing. I consider myself mostly a teacher. So this is some of my writing and really part of a workshop that I'm going to be presenting in the next couple months here, maybe even sooner. But this is some of the writing that I'm doing and actually some of the work that is built into the workshop. So the topic today is the quiet revolution. So we're going to talk about how women use their precious energy. If you're listening on a podcast, great. You're just going to hear my voice. If you're watching on YouTube, my camera angle is a little bit different because I need to kind of refer to some of my writing because there's quite a bit here. I know this topic cold, but there's a flow of points that I want to make. So my apologies if I'm not always looking into the camera. So let's just talk about how women use their precious energy, where it goes, who it serves, and what becomes possible when we finally fiercely claim it back. So I want to pose a question to you right now. So what would happen if you stopped pouring your energy into everything and everyone and redirected it toward what your soul actually came here to do? Or just redirected it towards yourself and what makes you happy? That question changed my life. And I'm going to ask it one more time. So what would happen if you stopped pouring your energy into everything outside of you and everyone else and redirected it toward what you wanted to do and what filled you up, also known as the steps to what your soul actually came here to do? So that question, as I said, changed my life, and I think it could change yours. So I think many of us can relate to what I'm about to share. And I want to speak about a specific woman right now. She's competent. She's capable. One of the, probably the most reliable person in the room. She's holding it all together at work, at home, in her community. And she's doing it well by every external measure. And she's probably exhausted in a way that she can't quite explain. She loves showing up for others, but she can't seem to get away from it. And society tells her that she has everything and should be grateful. And she is grateful. She's really grateful. So it's not burnout exactly. It's just something a little bit quieter. It's a kind of depletion that sleep really can't fix. A sense that her energy is going out in every direction, to her family, to her colleagues, to her inbox, to her phone, her obligations. But somewhere along the way, she stopped being one of those destinations for that energy. And she carries what I call the invisible structure. I spoke about that on this podcast before. The emotional labor, the remembering, the anticipation, the smoothing over. And she doesn't voice any resentment because she was taught to manage all of this and not to demand. And here's what I want this woman to know. This is not a personality flaw at all. The resentment isn't bad. You're not bad. It's a conditioned response to the systems that were built to need her energy, the systems that were built to use women's energy. So she didn't fail. She was just never really set up to win at the game. And the game was designed for her to play a supporting role and really for her to put herself last. Yeah, that sounds kind of depressing, but I'm really just trying to explain the context here about what many women experience and actually the reality. You all know my background is in organizational development, and that's systems theory is a foundational component to organizational development. We're trained to look at the whole, not just the parts. So when I apply that same lens to women's lives, what I see is kind of sobering. I've kind of picked out some areas that I want to break down what a systems theory approach looks like for women. Work systems. Let's think about work. To understand how we got here, we probably can go back to the Industrial Revolution, right? So that's not ancient history. That's our mother's generation, in many cases. So that history is exactly what you feel when you walk into the modern workplace. Because think about it. The workplace was literally designed around a man who had a wife at home handling everything else. That's how it was designed. The children, the appointments, the emotional life of the family was her job. So he could show up fully at work, stay late, and be considered committed. So women then later entered that same structure and were expected to perform the same way as men performed while handling still everything regarding the wife's job. Nothing in the system changed. We just added women's labor to it. That's the way corporations work. Now let's look at family systems. The research there is unambiguous, even in dual income households, where both partners work the same hours. Women carry the majority of the mental load, the scheduling, the remembering, the anticipating, the invisible coordination that keeps a family functioning. It doesn't show up on any ledger. It doesn't get called work, but it's constant and it's costly. And if you are fortunate enough, you can outsource some of that work, but you still will manage all the relationships and schedules related to that. There's also our cultural systems. We live in a culture that has celebrated the selfless woman for so long that selflessness has started to feel like an identity. I relate to this so much, being raised Catholic. And this didn't happen by accident. It was built deliberately over centuries, that every institution, right, shapes how we see ourselves. Think about the religious traditions that most of us were raised in. The highest feminine ideal was almost always rooted in sacrifice and self-service. Mary in the Catholic tradition, Mother Teresa, devotion to self was recast as sin. There's many cultures where this is true. Devotion to others was holiness. So those messages just didn't stay in the pew, for those of you who went to Mass. They migrate actually into our nervous system. It becomes a part of this. And even if you want to think about, the fairy tales that we were given as children, Sleeping Beauty, Waiting to be Awakened, Cinderella, serving, right? Her sisters and her terrible stepmother until she was rescued. We are handed these stories as little girls, and then they're called magic. So think about the language that we still use. We call women who are advocates for themselves difficult. We call women who set boundaries cold. Hillary Clinton, anyone? We call women who prioritize their own needs selfish. And we say it like it's the worst thing a woman can be. Now, there's been some headway in this, but I would say recently there's not. In the United States right now, a woman doesn't have the legal right to make decisions about her own body. Think about what that says about how we value women's autonomy, not just culturally, but in the law. The message is encoded in our bodies, our energy, and our choices, that we belong to the system before those choices, energy belongs to us. And I just want to say, oftentimes to want something for yourself or to protect your energy, to say no or to prioritize your own becoming can really feel like a moral failure for a lot of women. It's almost like you're doing motherhood wrong. So we just looked at these systems, right? The workplace, the family system, cultural systems, and women didn't build these systems, but she has been keeping them running. And we have been delivering for centuries. And that's the premise that I'm starting with here, is that we women have been leaking our energy into systems that were designed to need it. And we've been doing it for so long that we forget that the energy was ever ours to claim. So I want to be clear about why I'm saying all of this. I don't want to leave you with a feeling of heaviness or hopelessness. It's context to give you something that I like to think that most women have never really fully received, and that's validation. We give it to each other a lot, and there are certainly men in our lives who will validate us, but the systems that we have don't. So you're not doing it wrong. You're not weak. You're a woman operating inside systems that were never designed for your flourishing. And understanding that really changes everything. I know this woman, I was her. I want to talk about my personal story here. I had a successful career. And after working for corporations for my entire career, I decided to break out on my own later on in life. I got married at 38. I had my first son at 39 and my second son 14 months later at 40. And I, at that point, decided to become self-employed. I'd finished graduate school. I had kind of shifted careers a little bit, but I had worked enough to have enough experience behind me. And, truthfully, being self-employed allowed me the flexibility to be with my boys more often than working at a corporation. Had I worked with I was an older mother, so I wanted to be around in the beginning, and I didn't want the 8 weeks off. I wanted to decide if I needed more than 8 weeks, and I did. I needed more than 8 weeks. So it behooved me to build my own business, and it made sense. I would consult to organizations versus working in one. And like I said, I was happy to do this. And so was with my husband at the time. It was part of our idea and philosophy around raising and beginning our family. So I want to just say that having children is difficult for anyone. I mean, it's a lot of work. Working and having children is difficult. Having your own business and having young children is hard for any person. So in my case, I ended up working, the candle at both ends. That's something my dad used to always say to me. I have a lot of energy. I'm a Leo. I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. I got energy to spare. And I've had to learn how to use it in the right way and channel it in the right way. But I'm somebody who's fortunate. I have a lot of energy. And so I ended up working, at night, burning the candle at both ends. Ex-husband had a corporate job, so he was doing the long commute in the Silicon Valley and providing us with healthcare and doing a great job providing on that way. And I was doing pretty much everything else in building my small business. And I really felt grateful to do that. So grateful. I felt so lucky that I had a job that I loved, that I was building, that was taking a lot of my expertise and I was passionate about. I was able to have these 2 young, gorgeous boys and be their mom during the day. And I did get help. They went to a preschool for 3 hours a day, 2 days a week when they were 3 and 4. And then we started a little bit of daycare. I did not have a lot. And in the beginning, I shared a nanny with a friend. But again, I had help probably like 10 hours a week. And that's when I would work on my business during the day and try to get some things done to begin it. I couldn't do the math for you, but in the beginning, my time was with my kids. And then I would work late at night on the business, doing proposals, all of these kind of things. If I had to rush out to a meeting, that's when I would get help. A lot of people do this. And I felt lucky to be able to have what I thought it all. So I was able to focus on being a good mom, a good consultant, a good wife, a good domestic person, And I also managed every relationship that we had in our life. The relationships come easy to me. And so I was able to, I don't know, I can honestly say that every relationship I owned, everyone that touched our life, whether it was a friend, a family, a resource, a teacher, a coach, you name it, it was mine. I was point, I knew everything. I mean, I was the connector. And so I also was the operating system of the family, the cook, the cleaner, the organizer, the decor specialist. I was not a gardener. Thank God. I was very conscious of that. Although I did get chickens. I was like, do not become a gardener. You do not need to know one more thing. Just keep what you got. So I was the owner of all things school. I was the financial contributor in a meaningful way. This was kind of what I just did both. And I think many women do that. And as we all know, child rearing years are busy years. They're just long days and fast years. So I think from the outside, everything looked fine, more than fine. In many ways, we all love our kids and we all try to pursue meaningful work. And we all want to invest in our partnerships and relationships with family and friends. And I think many of us are very good at making everything look fine. But my health started to take a toll. And so when we moved to Switzerland in 2019, my boys were 10 and 11 respectively. By that time, I had the beginning stages of an autoimmune disease. I was diagnosed, which was, I've talked about it just briefly before on this podcast, as a precursor to ulcerative colitis. I'd already had shingles. I was sleep deprived. My health wasn't the best. I exercised, but I could never really get on top of things. And it just became my norm. So when I moved from the United States to Switzerland, it did something for me that I think is very difficult for the normal woman or the normal person to do. It completely flipped my perspective. Listen, many women and men probably have fantasied about, leaving it all behind and starting anew. But they don't want to leave their families. I got to leave it all behind and start anew with my family. It was a gift, such a gift. So all of those pressures of daily life and daily routine, it was hard, but it was a welcome hard. I'm an adventurer anyway, and I like challenges. So, for me to get out of the daily routine and start something new, I got to unplug for everything, and all the relationships I had to manage and all those responsibilities gone. I had to make new ones in my new world, but I got to decide now how much energy I wanted to spend on that. And I could work at my own pace. At the time, my ex had a global role, so he was supposed to travel a lot. So I could only work. I worked virtually in the evening, only worked probably about 10 to 12 hours a week maximum, 10 really. So I was working part-time light, and there's all this nature there, and I had to learn the language, and I had to get the family set up. But honestly, it was nothing compared to my life in California in terms of the rat race and the grind. Nothing. And everything was new, and it was just incredible. So the reason I bring that up is because we start to drift, right? We get stuck in these roles. We're like, how do I get out? My mom comes over every Sunday. We do this, all of these things. Like, I can't break this norm, or I'm going to not start, working with my kids' teachers on things. Like, it can be difficult, but I unplugged from all of that. And then it allowed me to see how I got to where I was, to this place of kind of just exhaustion. I started to ask myself questions like, where was my energy actually going, and where did I want it to go? I began to audit, like, not my calendar, not my finances, but my energy, what I was giving it to and why. What was the driving giving me? Was it love, or was it fear? Was I being genuine with my generosity, or was it the old conditioning that my worth depended on? I needed to be useful. My self-worth is very related to being useful and productive and adding value. And I don't think that's a bad one, but I needed to explore that. So I reviewed all the decisions in my life, and I just want to share this exercise with you because it was one of the most clarifying things I've ever done. And it's also in the workshop. This is a reflection exercise to take a look at all the major areas in your life, your education, your career, your relationships, and any major life transitions. The moves that you made, the paths you chose, the things that you said yes to, and the things that you walked away from. Those are the major life transitions. And for each one of those, write them down and ask yourself a single question. Was this decision driven more by expectation, by survival, or inner knowing? So let me define this. Expectation means, what your family expected, your culture expected, the world around you expected that you're supposed to do. The path that was laid out before you even had a chance to ask yourself what you actually wanted. Survival is meaning that you made the best choice available to you at the time, given your circumstances, your fear, your financial reality, or your need or safety and belonging. You can look at a marriage or relationship from this standpoint. You can look at a job choice. And then the third one is your inner knowing, meaning that somewhere inside of you, there's a quiet, clear voice that said at this time, this is mine and I'm following it. I did that map. I call it a relationship timeline, and then I map out what was at the core of making this decision: expectation, survival, or inner knowing. And I want you to notice, here's the thing, when you go through all of this, that most of us will find that there's a mix of all three. That's not failure, that's human life, okay? But what you're looking for is the pattern. How often were you in the driver's seat of your own life? And how often were you navigating by someone else's map? And then you have to have the courage to ask this deeper question. Where did I abandon myself in the service of the system? And what did I tell myself to make that okay? Maybe you told yourself it was temporary. I did. I told myself I was only going to I was devoted to my family and the kids were going to, maybe you told yourself it was love. Maybe you told yourself that you really didn't want that thing anyway. So it's not about blame. It's not about blaming others. It's not about blaming yourself. It's about clarity. Because you can't reclaim energy that you haven't located yet. And this exercise will help you find it. So now that you have the clarity, you can see the pattern where you've been navigating by somebody else's map, and there might be a mix of feelings when you do this, like maybe some grief, some anger, maybe a strong sense of relief. But all of that's welcome. And once you do the exercise, here's the question that matters most next. What do you do with what you've just seen? The first thing when you do that review, that reflection, the first thing I want to say is don't blow up your life. This is not what it's about. Clarity is not a mandate for chaos. It is not. You don't have to leave your job, end your relationship, or disappear to Bali to reclaim your energy. What you have to do is start making smaller, braver choices consistently over time. This is the hardest part because anytime we're starting to change our core, change our nervous system, change our diet, any of these major things, it's these small, consistent, brave choices over time. So here's the way I think about it. It starts with your attention. Before you change anything external, notice where your attention goes in a day. The first place you look when you wake up, the problems you volunteer to solve, the needs you anticipate before they're even expressed. Attention is energy in its earliest form. And what you consistently attend from attention, you feed. I'm going to say it again. What you consistently attend to, you feed. So if you're putting all your attention on others and other things and distractions, you will feed that. Then you need to start asking a different question. Most of us move through our days asking what's needed of me. I want you all to start asking what is true for me. Not instead of showing up for others, but alongside it. Both questions deserve airtime. When you ask the question, what is true for me, you'll notice that it goes into your body. When you ask the question, what do I think about this? What should I do about this? You'll notice your attention goes to your head. When you say what is true for me, you automatically drop into a more somatic way of experiencing this question. And then when you ask what is true for me, that changed for me, it changed everything. I started practicing that with a pause. And before I'd say yes to anything, before I decided to give my energy and attention to something, before I decided to take on one more thing, I would pause. Because in that pause, that's where the inner knowing lives. It's so small at first, it's easy to override. But the more you honor it, the more you trust it, and even the louder it gets, at least the knowing of it. So this is the process of beginning to listen to yourself and really starting to follow what you want to do. And that's a completely different thing. And so I want to encourage you all to go through this exercise. So this is where the episode title comes in. It's called, the quiet evolution. And here it's what I've come to understand, that it's just not about one woman's healing or one woman reclaiming their energy. It's when a woman reclaims her energy, when she stops becoming invisible, the invisible infrastructure, and starts to become the author of her own life, something moves, not just in her, but all around her. Her daughters watch, her sons watch, her colleagues recalibrate, her partners are asked for the first time to hold their own weight. Her communities can feel the shift. So this is the revolution. But it doesn't look like what we've been told revolutions look like. It's not loud, it's not angry, or at least it doesn't stay angry. It's quiet, internal, and it's completely destabilizing to the status quo. Because when we women stop subsidizing these systems that were designed to drain us, those systems have to change. They actually have no choice. So feminine energy at its core is cyclical. It creates and then it rests and then it creates again. It does not hustle. And capitalism is built on the hustle. So it has a rhythm. And when women start living from our own natural rhythms, instead of performing against it, which what we do when we participate in these systems in a way where we can lose ourselves, everything recalibrates. So what I want to say is, and I see a lot of these leadership development, a lot of these leadership programs in the corporate world, but even in the life coaching arena, women don't need to be pushing harder. We need more women living from alignment. That is the revolution. And I believe that revolution starts exactly the place that you might least expect it. And that's in the quiet, in the willingness to ask the question that most of us have been trained to defer. What did I come here to do? And what has been standing in the way? So if this episode is landing for you and you've heard yourself somewhere in here, I don't think that that's an accident. The woman this work is for is intelligent. She's capable, deeply feeling. She's read the books, taken the courses, and attended the workshops. She's not looking for more inspiration. She wants integration. She actually wants to live differently, not just know differently. So at the center of it, the question that she's asking is, what meaning is moving through my life and what has been blocking it? This question is at the heart of my Inner Courage workshop, my signature program for women who are ready to stop leaking their energy and start living from their genuine authority. So I look forward to all of you sharing it all with you, because when in the course of our time together, when I work with women, we're going to do three things. We're going to see clearly, without flinching, what's been driving our depletion. We're going to reclaim it, our energy, the agency, and that sense of self that got outsourced along the way. And then we're going to live it. We're going to build a life that is actually designed around what our soul came here to do. So I look forward to sharing with all of you here when it comes out. You came here for a reason, not to hold everyone else together, not to be the invisible infrastructure of someone else's life. We all came here to live something. And I believe that most of us know what that is. It doesn't have to be big. We don't even have to hear it fully yet, but because it's still usually just a whisper beneath all the noise. So that's what this work is for. And that's why this podcast exists. So thank you for being here. And if this episode moved you, stirred something in you, share it with a woman who needs it, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. And come find me at Live Your Jam. And I look forward to seeing you all in the future. Thank you.